Yes, amen. You can take a seat. It's an amazing thing to be a child of God. Well, we live in a very cynical age, as you all know, but despite that, people still love stories of heroism. They love it when somebody sacrifices themselves to save somebody else. And I just want to acknowledge this morning our brave Secret Service agents who again sacrificed themselves to save our president from another assassination attempt last night. But think beyond people who are trained to do that. Something happened back on April 7th of this month. At a school, Pauls Valley High School in Oklahoma, a former student, 20 years old, walked into the school with 2 handguns, intending to kill as many students as possible. He fired at one student, his gun jammed. He took his other gun, fired at a different student, he missed. 2 more students were right there in his presence. They begged for their life and he let them go. But he fully intended to take out this murderous plan of his. But at that moment, when he let those 2 students go, Principal Kirk Moore came from right beside him, tackled him. He was shot in the leg in the process, but he was able to subdue this gunman and hold him down till the police arrived. The police were very clear. They said Principal Moore saved countless lives that day. He was truly a hero. In fact, they made him prom king this past week. Pretty amazing. Now, Kirk Moore was definitely a hero. He acted like a hero. He didn't look like a hero. He looked like every middle-aged man who leads a basically sedentary life. But man, what an amazing thing he did to save those kids. But here's the deal about Kirk Moore. He is a genuine hero, but he still can't fix everything else in that community. Those students are still going to show up and have to deal with the trauma that they went through. He can't answer the question of why a 20-year-old student, former student, would show up to do that. He saved them from the gunman, but he can't save them from the world that they live in. And that's what every earthly hero can do. They can save you from something, but they can't save you from everything. And that's actually what the book of Judges is all about. We've been looking at the book of Judges the past couple weeks. This book speaks to the question that faces all of us. When your life hits something that you can't fix, who saves you? Who saves you? Pastor Lee and Pastor John have set the stage in the first couple chapters of what's happening with the nation of Israel. They are going to be caught in this endless cycle where this people that have been set aside to follow the Lord, they choose to unsubscribe from following the Lord. And instead, they choose to follow other gods. So God, to get their attention, he allows a nation to arise to oppress them, to get their attention. After some time, they cry out to the Lord. And in his grace, God offers them a deliverer, a judge, or we might call them a hero. God uses that judge, that hero, to rescue them from their oppressor. And for a time, they turn back to the Lord. They resubscribe. They begin to follow him once again. Only years later, a generation later sometimes, to make the decision again to walk away from the Lord. And again, to find themselves under an oppressor. This 3rd chapter of Judges is going to show us something very critical. That yes, God raises up heroes, but these heroes are all temporary. And they can certainly rescue the people from their enemies, but they cannot rescue them from the deeper problem that exists for these people. And we're going to see for all of us that we certainly do need a hero, but we need the right hero. So we're moving from the first couple chapters that were pretty much an overview of this cycle that the people are going to be stuck in. Now we get into the accounts of the individual judges. And we're going to start with the first judge, whose name is Othniel. So let me begin reading in verse 7 of chapter 3. And the people of Israel did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. They forgot the Lord their God and served the Baals and the Asheroth. Therefore, the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and he sold them into the hand of Cushan-Rishathaim, king of Mesopotamia. And the people of Israel served Cushan-Rishathaim 8 years. But when the people of Israel cried out to the Lord raised up a deliverer for the people of Israel who saved them, Othniel, the son of Kenaz, Caleb's younger brother. The Spirit of the Lord was upon him, and he judged Israel. He went out to war, and the Lord gave Cushan-Rishathaim, king of Mesopotamia, into his hand. And his hand prevailed against Cushan-Rishathaim, so the land had rest for 40 years. Then Othniel, the son of Kenaz, died. And so what we see here is we see the pattern beginning. This pattern I talked about, this cycle, it begins right here. And just as Pastor John talked about last week, the people forget the Lord. How do they forget about him? This isn't a passive forgetfulness. Usually when we forget something, it's because we truly just forget it. We don't try to forget, we just forget. But the people, it was more than that. They were actively serving Baal and the Asheroth. They were serving these fertility gods. They were hoping that these fertility gods would bring rain, would bring crops, would bring fruitfulness in terms of children. So what did the people forget? Well, they forgot that Yahweh, the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, is the only true God. If anyone's in charge of the weather, it's Yahweh. They didn't need to look to these other gods for fertility, for their crops, for their families. They just need to trust in God. But the problem is they're surrounded by these people who believe differently. And what they're doing here is they're actually hedging their bets. They're hedging their bets. They're saying, yeah, I kind of believe in God. I believe in Yahweh, but I'm just gonna follow these other guys just in case it might actually do something for me. Hedging our bets isn't always about totally rejecting one thing. It's often saying, I'm just going to add this other thing to what I already believe. In our culture, people hedge their bets all the time. One kind of silly way are superstitions. Let me explain. Superstitions, things like knock on wood, okay? You know people that say that. Maybe some of you say that. You say something, you're like, and you don't want to I don't know, for something bad to happen, so you knock on wood. Or some people wear a certain outfit before certain games. Because if you wear that Eagles jersey, the Eagles will most certainly win on Sunday, right? Or the Phillies, okay? Those kinds of things. And it seems kind of silly, and it seems like not a big deal, just kind of having fun. But at the heart of those superstitions is actually pagan religion. It's a belief that there's power in your words or power in some object, power that you have control over. And so you're basically rejecting God's ultimate control over the universe and saying, no, I can manage this situation on my own. So it might seem like a small thing, but I'm encouraging you, stop feeding into superstitions. Don't say knock on wood anymore. You don't need to, ever. You don't need to wear that. You can wear that jersey, that's fine. But you wearing that jersey is not going to make them win that game, okay? Just think about it. But hedging your bets is about more than superstitions. You see, anything that you turn to, apart from God, to rescue you from a situation has become a functional savior for you. You can tell when you're hedging your bets by answering a few questions. Here's a few questions I want you to think about. What do you run to when you're anxious? What do I think I need to be okay? And what, if I lost it, would make life feel unbearable? Think about that. Maybe when you're anxious, you run to all sorts of things to distract you, to help you forget what's happening. Maybe when you find yourself in a situation that's terrible, you're like, I'm going to do everything possible to control this situation. I am going to will it in a certain direction. Or maybe you're looking for validation from other people all the time. You really need that validation from other people to feel okay about the world. Or maybe there's some object or some person in your life. You're like, I could not ever live without that thing or without that person. I don't know what it might be for you, but I think we all at times have things like this. The bottom line is that we are trying to solve the problem on our own. We're not trusting the Lord with these situations. We're going to try to take it into our own hands. This is really easy for us to do in a culture that values control and comfort and immediate gratification. Because trusting the Lord often means waiting, and we are really bad at waiting. So the people of Israel here are hedging their bets. But in doing so, they had abandoned God altogether, and so God had to get their attention. And that's why he brings this first oppressor of the Israelites, Cushan Rishathaim. I worked all week on that name, just to let you know. His name literally means Cushan of double wickedness. Okay? This wasn't his real name. The author's like, I'm gonna tell you what this guy's really all about. I'm not gonna really give you his real name. He's Cushan of double wickedness. And so for 8 years, the people are subjugated by this guy. And then the Lord raises up the first of the judges, Othniel. Now, Othniel, he is the ideal hero. He checks all the right boxes. First of all, we saw back in chapter 1 that Othniel actually went and defeated one of the cities of the Canaanites. He's already done heroic deeds. We see that Othniel is the nephew of Caleb. Now, Caleb and Joshua were the only two people, when the people of Israel first came to the land and were about ready to enter the land, they were the only two that believed that God would give the land into their hand. Everybody else doubted. And because everybody else doubted, the Lord said, I'm going to send you into the wilderness for 40 years. I'm going to allow this entire generation to die out before I give you the land. The only two to survive to their old age, to survive into this time, is Caleb and Joshua. And so there's this heritage of faithfulness and courage and strength that exists within this family that Othniel is a part of. Othniel would have sat and heard the stories of the Exodus directly from Caleb, maybe even from Joshua himself. There's something amazing here for him to live up to. He also marries one of Caleb's daughters. So Caleb, his family, would have, in a sense, been a royal family there for the nation of Israel. And he marries further into this royal family. And then look at this note in verse 10. The Spirit of the Lord was upon him. It is very rare in the Old Testament for God's Spirit to empower someone directly, but he does here with Othniel. And so the people have 40 years of rest and peace. They stop hedging their bets, and instead they choose to follow God again. So Othniel is the ideal hero. He follows the Lord, he remains pure, God's Spirit is upon him, and he leads his people to victory. He's what every hero we think ought to be. That leads us to the next judge, Ehud. Before I talk about Ehud, I need to give you a little warning. Here's the warning. Okay, parental guidance is necessary. Violence, scripture, pointy objects, and really, really fat kings. Okay, that's where we're going. You just need to know. But seriously, this story is a little crazy. You're going to see how that is. But it is a story that's meant to be read to your children. For 3,000 years, Jewish families have been reading this story to their kids. It is guaranteed to both frighten and fascinate your children, okay? So with all that said, let's get into the story, starting in verse 12. And the people of Israel, again, did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. And the Lord strengthened Eglon, the king of Moab, against Israel, because they had done what was evil in the sight of the Lord. He gathered to himself the Ammonites and the Amalekites and went and defeated Israel. And they took possession of the city of palms, and the people of Israel served Eglon, the king of Moab, for 18 years. Now, let me just explain. Eglon from Moab, the Amalekites, the Amorites. This isn't some king from a distant land like Cushan, whatever his name was. It's not that guy. These are nations that are right next door, and these are major powers that oppose Israel. This is a big deal, what's happening here. And then 18 years, not just 8. The previous oppressor, Cushan of double wickedness, was only 8 years. This is 18 years. That's a long time. That's a whole generation of people. All right, verse 15, let's pick up the story. Then the people of Israel cried out to the Lord, and the Lord raised up for them a deliverer, Ehud, the son of Gera, the Benjaminite, a left-handed man. We'll come back to that in just a minute. The people of Israel sent tribute by him to Eglon, the king of Moab. And Ehud made for himself a sword with two edges, a cubit in length. It's about 18 inches. He bound it on his right thigh under his clothes. And he presented the tribute to Eglon, king of Moab. Now, Eglon was a very fat man. How fat was he? We'll find out in just a minute. And when Ehud had finished presenting the tribute, he sent away the people who carried the tribute. But he himself turned back at the idols near Gilgal and said, I have a secret message for you, O king. And nobody can refuse or resist a secret message. And so he commanded, that is, Eglon commanded, silence. And all his attendants went out from his presence. And Ehud came to him as he was sitting alone in the cool roof chamber. And Ehud said, I have a message from God for you. And he arose from his seat, and Ehud reached with his left hand and took the sword from his right thigh and thrust it into his belly. And the hilt also went in after the blade, and the fat closed over the blade, for he did not pull the sword out of his belly. And the dung came out. Yeah. Then Ehud went out into the porch and closed the doors of the roof chamber behind him and locked them. Okay. I told you, I warned you. Kind of crazy. Ehud here is kind of a cross between a spy and a Navy SEAL. He's kind of like the ancient Ethan Hunt of Mission Impossible fame. He's a little bit like that. But first of all, he makes his own weapon, probably made out of bronze. Bronze wasn't a great weapon to take in the battle because it would chip and break easily. But for one little thing, one stab, pretty good weapon. I talked here about his left-handedness. Why is that important? Well, okay, let me ask this. How many here are left-handed? Raise your hand. Okay, so yeah, that's about right. It's usually about 10% of the population is left-handed, which is interesting because I have two boys and they're both left-handed, so I don't know what's going on there. But let me let you know, you left-handers out there, archaeologists know that the people of that day thought that left-handed people were not a serious military threat. Okay? They're left-handed after all. So they certainly would have searched Ehud. They would have frisked him. But they never thought that he might have a weapon hidden where only a left-handed person could reach it. I also asked, how fat is King Eglon? Well, when we have a question nowadays that we can't answer, well, who do we ask? AI. Okay, so I went to some AI programs. I explained the situation. I shared the passage. I said, how fat would he have had to be for that blade to go all the way in? I will spare you all the gory details, but he was probably 350 to 400 pounds. Now, somebody reminded me after first service, there's offensive linemen out there that are that big, okay? This isn't an offensive lineman. He's probably shorter than me. I'm almost positive this guy was shorter than me, but like way bigger, okay? Now, think about this. In our day, it's very possible for somebody to get that large. We have ready access to food. It's just, all of us have to fight against gaining weight, right? That's kind of where we're at. But at that time, this would not have been easy. He would have had to really work at becoming that large. And I think he's making a statement here, this King Eglon. He's saying, I am so prosperous and I am so powerful that I can get to the place where I can barely get around. Because I can trust in my power. I can trust in my prosperity. There's certainly a complete lack of self-control here, but also a complete confidence in his own power. But God shows him where the power really lies. Now let's pick up the story. Verse 24. When he had gone, that is, Ehud had gone, the servants came, and when they saw that the doors of the roof chamber were locked, they thought, surely he is relieving himself in the closet of the cool chamber. After all, there is a smell coming from the door. And they waited until they were embarrassed. Because do you want to be the first one to go in there? No, I don't think so. But when he still did not open the doors of the roof chamber, they took the key and opened them, and there lay their lord dead on the floor. Meanwhile, Ehud escaped while they delayed, and he passed beyond the idols and escaped to Seirah. When he arrived, he sounded the trumpet in the hill country of Ephraim. Then the people of Israel went down with him from the hill country, and he was their leader. And he said to them, "Follow after me, for the Lord has given your enemies, the Moabites, into your hand." So they went down after him and seized the fords of the Jordan against the Moabites and did not allow anyone to pass over. And they killed at that time about 10,000 of the Moabites, all strong, able-bodied men. Not a man escaped. So Moab was subdued that day under the hand of Israel, and the land had rest for 80 years. Pretty crazy story. It's a crazy story. It's gross, it's violent, but there's some important lessons we have to learn from what happens here. The author is sharing all of these details for a reason. You see, God uses a supposed weakness and unexpected means to accomplish his plans. And he chooses to use Ehud here, not just to deliver the people, but to humiliate God's enemy, to humiliate him. And as we look at this story, we're supposed to laugh at the story. It's meant to be funny. The author meant it that way. And not just because it's gross. Kids will read this story and they'll be like, "Ooh, that's gross," and they'll laugh because it's gross. But the reason it's funny and the reason we can laugh is because the defeat of God's enemies is a good thing, and God's enemies here are being mocked. The writer is writing it as this, and he who does what he does to mock God's enemies. And it is a good thing for God's enemies to be mocked and be defeated. And so we read a story like this, we're supposed to cheer. We're supposed to say, yes, he got what was coming to him. Now, I read a story like this, and I have to address something. I don't have time to talk about it at length this morning, but I want to acknowledge that sometimes God protects a leader from multiple assassination attempts. And other times, God chooses someone to go and assassinate somebody who opposes him. That's why we have to stand and say, I fall at your feet, God, and I allow you to be the one who brings vengeance, not us. But God is in control, and God will accomplish his plans. But in the end, that's why I look at Ehud and I say, well, he's not the ideal hero. I call him the subversive hero. He's left-handed. You know, those left-handers out there. He uses deception to gain an advantage. The violence is graphic, but God uses him to take out God's enemies. One more judge I want to highlight in verse 31. After him, that is, after Ehud, was Shamgar, the son of Anath, who killed 600 of the Philistines with an ox goad, and he also saved Israel. There's no detailed story here. I think the author needed a break after that last one. He's like, I'm done. I need a break. One verse, that's all he gets. And Shamgar seems to have served under Ehud, probably toward the end of Ehud's life. And it would have been really hard for him to kind of come out from under the shadow of a large figure, an amazing hero figure like Ehud. That's why I call Shamgar the overshadowed hero. But still, he rescues the people. He kills 600 Philistines with an ox goad. You're like, what's an ox goad? It's a really long stick, about 8 to 10 feet long, that you would use to drive the oxen as they're plowing the field. And at the end of this stick is a chisel-like blade that you would use to get dirt out of the plow when it would get clogged up. I don't really want to know how he used an ox goad to kill 600 people, but that's what happened, and he saved Israel. And under both Ehud and Shamgar, the people experienced 80 years of peace. This would end up being the longest period of peace that they would experience in the time of the judges. So this is pretty amazing what happens here. The people of Israel, though, had to continue to look to other people to deliver them. And these judges that are raised up, they only delivered them for a time before the people turned away again. It never lasted more than a couple generations before the people were once again turning away from the Lord and turning to other gods. So what do these stories have to do with us? Well, we are a lot like the people of Israel. You see, we also need a hero. But most of us don't really feel like it. After all, there aren't armies marching through our neighborhoods. None of us have to pay tribute to some leader. And no, your property taxes don't count as tribute. And life is pretty comfortable for us. But comfort has a way of masking the real problems in our lives. Because at some point, all those things that you're trusting in to fix your problems are going to fail you. At some point, you're not going to be able to do anything to get yourself out of the situation you find yourself in. At some point, you won't be able to distract yourself away from your problems. At some point, you're going to lose control of the situation. At some point, people are not going to give you the validation that you desire. At some point, that person or that thing that you depend upon is going to be taken away from you. Eventually, there's going to be something that none of us can get ourselves out of. And the question is, who do we turn to then? Here's what the book of Judges is very honest about. That even the best human hero cannot fix all of our problems. Othniel was spirit empowered. He was faithful. He's everything you'd want in a leader. He brought 40 years of peace. And then it all unraveled. Ehud was bold and brilliant. He brought 80 years of rest. And then it all unraveled. The judges were not getting better during this time period. They are actually getting worse. As we're going to see through the rest of this book, they get worse and worse. And then the kings that came after the judges, hundreds of years later, they weren't much better in helping the people to remain faithful to God. You see, every hero in this book rescues the people from something, but they can't rescue Israel from themselves. And that's our problem too. We need someone to rescue us from ourselves. Think about who that would be. Think about what would need to be true of that person to rescue us from ourselves. Well, that person would need to be wise enough to know what's actually going wrong with us. Wise enough to actually know what's going on inside of us. It would need to be somebody who cares enough to actually get involved in our lives. That they would care enough about you to get involved in your life. It would need to be somebody powerful enough to actually do something to change us. And it would need to be somebody who can deal not just with the daily mess of our lives, but somebody who can deal with what happens when our lives are over. There's only one person that can meet all of these requirements, and that's Jesus. You see, Jesus can do what no earthly hero could ever do. He can rescue you from yourself. He can change you from the inside out. And he can save you in every way that you need saving. When Jesus came 1,000 years after these judges, the people of Israel thought that he was coming to rescue them from the Romans, just as these judges had rescued them from all these other kings and rulers over the ages. But Jesus didn't come to liberate them from Rome, at least not yet. He came to rescue them from the one enemy that no judge, no hero, no army could ever defeat: their own sin. They could never defeat the people's sin. And he came to rescue us from our sin as well. Because when you place your faith in Jesus, when you choose to trust in him, he'll forgive your sins. He'll begin to change you from the inside out. He'll give you his spirit to live with you and to transform you. And Jesus doesn't promise to remove every hard thing in our lives, but he does promise that we won't walk through them alone. And he promises that that thing that you're carrying right now, that thing that's really difficult in your life right now that you have a hard time carrying, he'll help carry it with you. Because Jesus is coming ultimately to set everything right, to bring down every oppressor, to defeat every evil, to remove sin once and for all. And every one of us who has placed our faith and trust in him will get to live with him and reign with him in a restored kingdom. We are all drawn to stories of heroic rescues. I shared one of them earlier. There was another one that really stands out to me. This happened back in 2018 when 12 boys and their coach found themselves in a cave in Thailand. This was a soccer team. These boys, part of a soccer team, they went into this cave system all the time. It's just a fun place for them to go. So they went into the cave system, and then it began to rain. The coach, realizing what was happening, went in after the boys to try to rescue the boys, but found himself also trapped by the rising rain waters in this cave system. The boys had to move further and further back into this cave system to the point where they were 2.5 miles from the cave entrance. Water the whole way. What happened after that was one of the most amazing rescue operations in human history. They had, first of all, the cave divers had to make their way. They didn't know if the boys were alive at first. They had to make their way through this entire cave system, all the way back to where they found the boys. And they're like, how do we get these boys out? They did what had never been done before. They sedated the boys, sedated them, put oxygen masks on them, and then carried them through the waters 2.5 miles. And after 18 days, all of the boys and their coach were rescued. Amazing. Amazing. If your children were in that kind of situation, you would want authorities to move heaven and earth to save your kids. If you're ever in a situation where you need to be rescued, you'd want somebody to rescue you as well. Well, an earthly hero can rescue you from something, but only Jesus can rescue you from everything. Othniel brought 40 years of peace. 40 years, a couple generations. Jesus, he will bring a peace that never ends. Ehud defeated one corrupt king, but Jesus defeats sin and death and the grave. Shamgar saved Israel with a farming tool, but Jesus saves the world through the cross. So let's look to Jesus. Jesus is the one hero that we all desperately need.